In 1977, a man in rural Ohio got behind the wheel of his pickup truck with a loaded gun, drove into the night to confront the person who had been sending his family anonymous threatening letters and never came home alive. His truck was found wrapped around a tree. His gun had been fired. And to this day, no one can explain what really happened on that dark stretch of road. But here's the most chilling part: after his death, the letters didn't stop. They multiplied. And they would haunt an entire town for over 20 years. Welcome to Obscura Files. Circleville, Ohio. Population, roughly 13,000 in the mid-1970s. A quiet, unremarkable community about 30 miles south of Columbus, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone, where doors stay unlocked, and where secrets don't stay secret for long. It was exactly this kind of small-town familiarity that made what happened next so terrifying. In the spring of 1976, a school bus driver named Mary Gillespie received a handwritten letter. It was anonymous. There was no return address. And its contents were deeply personal. The letter accused Mary of having an affair with the superintendent of the local school district, a man named Gordon Massey. The writer didn't just make vague accusations, they included specific details. Times. Locations. Routes Mary drove her bus. Whoever wrote this letter was watching. Mary's husband, Ron Gillespie, received letters too. So did Gordon Massey. So did members of the school board. The letters were threatening, vulgar, and disturbingly well-informed. They warned Ron to put a stop to the affair, or the writer would go public. They warned the school board that if they didn't take action, the entire community would learn the truth. The Gillespies told close friends and family. They tried to ignore the letters. But the letters kept coming week after week, month after month. Each one more aggressive than the last. And whoever was behind them seemed to know every move the Gillespies made. So what happens when an anonymous stalker pushes a desperate man too far? On the night of August 19, 1977, Ron Gillespie had had enough. He told his family he had figured out who was writing the letters, and he was going to confront them. He grabbed his .25 caliber handgun, climbed into his pickup truck, and drove off into the darkness. He never made it home. Ron's truck was found crashed into a tree off the road. He was dead. The official ruling was that he had been killed in a single vehicle accident. But the details didn't add up. His gun was found in the truck and it had been fired once. There was no evidence of a target, no explanation for the discharge. His blood alcohol level was reportedly elevated, but people close to Ron insisted he hadn't been drinking heavily that evening. Was it really just an accident? Or did Ron find the letter writer and did that encounter end his life? Here's where it gets strange. After Ron's death, the letters didn't stop. If anything, the writer became bolder. The volume of letters increased dramatically. They were no longer just targeting the Gillespies, now they went out to dozens of residents across Pickaway County. The writer seemed to know everyone's secrets. Affairs. Financial troubles. Personal grudges. It was as if someone had cracked open the town like an egg and was reading the yolk. Mary Gillespie, now a widow, continued to receive the most vicious letters of all. The writer accused her of continuing the affair with Gordon Massey. They threatened her children. They told her they were always watching. Then, in 1983, something escalated beyond paper and ink. Mary noticed a strange sign posted along her school bus route. It was hand-lettered, crude, and it publicly accused her and Gordon Massey of their alleged affair, positioned where children and parents couldn't miss it. When Mary pulled over to tear the sign down, she discovered something that made her blood run cold. The sign was connected to a crude booby trap. A small box had been rigged behind it with a loaded gun, positioned so that a string attached to the sign could potentially discharge the weapon when the sign was pulled. Whether it was designed to kill or merely to terrorize, the intent was unmistakably violent. The sheriff's office investigated. They analyzed handwriting. They tested the gun found in the booby-trap. And that gun was traced back to a man named Paul Freshour, Mary Gillespie's former brother-in-law. Paul was Ron Gillespie's sister's husband. He lived in the area. He had access to the kind of personal information the letters contained. And when investigators dug deeper, they found that his handwriting bore similarities to the writing on the letters. In 1983, Paul Freshour was arrested and charged not with writing the letters, because that alone wasn't a prosecutable crime at the time, but with the attempted murder of Mary Gillespie via the booby-trapped sign. He was tried, convicted, and sentenced to 7 to 25 years in prison. Case closed? Not even close. What would you have done if you were an investigator on this case and the primary suspect was finally locked away? You would have expected the letters to stop. Everyone expected the letters to stop. They didn't. From the moment Paul Freshour entered the Correctional Reception Center in Orient, Ohio, new letters began appearing in mailboxes across Circleville. Same handwriting. Same tone. Same intimate knowledge of the town's secrets. Paul was in a maximum security facility with his mail monitored, and yet the letters kept flowing, sometimes arriving in locations that made it nearly impossible for him to have sent them. Investigators confirmed that the letters were not being mailed from inside the prison. Paul Freshour himself received a letter while incarcerated. It read, "Now write all the letters you want, Freshour." The implication was unmistakable. Someone else was out there. Someone who had either been the real writer all along or who had taken up the pen to continue the campaign of terror. Over the course of 2 decades, an estimated 1,000 letters were sent to residents of Circleville and the surrounding area. 1,000 letters. All anonymous. All handwritten. All filled with secrets that no single person should have known. Forensic analysts examined the handwriting repeatedly. Some said it matched Freshour's. Others were less certain. The FBI was consulted but never made a definitive identification. Paul Freshour maintained his innocence until his death in 2012. He insisted he had been framed. He claimed the real letter writer had set him up, planting the gun to ensure he would take the fall. Mary Gillespie, for her part, eventually admitted publicly that she had indeed been involved with Gordon Massey, but she denied that Paul was the writer and suggested the truth was far more complicated than anyone realized. So if Paul Freshour didn't write the letters, who did? And if he did write them, who continued sending them while he sat in a prison cell? The Circleville letters stopped appearing sometime in the mid-1990s. No final letter. No confession. No dramatic reveal. They simply ceased. Like a voice that had been screaming into the void for 20 years finally went quiet. Some investigators believe Paul Freshour was the original writer and that a sympathizer or accomplice continued the campaign while he was imprisoned. Others believe the real writer was never caught, that Paul was a convenient scapegoat, and the true author of those 1,000 letters lived and died without ever being identified. A few fringe theories suggest multiple writers were involved, a kind of collective paranoia that fed on itself until an entire town was consumed. But consider this: whoever wrote those letters knew the deepest, most guarded secrets of dozens of people in a small Ohio town. They sustained a campaign of psychological terror for nearly 2 decades. They may have been connected to the death of Ron Gillespie. They rigged a loaded weapon to a roadside sign. And they were never, not once, caught in the act. What kind of person has that level of patience, that depth of knowledge, and that commitment to remaining invisible? Were they motivated by jealousy? Revenge? Or something darker, a need to control an entire community through fear? The letters are sealed in evidence. The primary suspect is dead. The town has moved on, or at least it tries to. But somewhere in the files, in the handwriting, in the postmarks and the paper, the answer is waiting. The question is whether anyone will ever find it. This has been Obscura Files. If this case unsettled you the way it unsettled us, do me a favor, hit subscribe, and ring that bell so you never miss a new investigation. We dive into the darkest corners of history so you don't have to go alone. Drop your theory about the Circleville Letter Writer in the comments below. Who do you think was really behind those letters? We read every single comment. Until next time, stay curious. Stay suspicious. And whatever you do, check your mailbox carefully.